Good morning. My name is Dorothy Keenan, and I'm here to talk to you about a program called GranInvolve. Happy Mother's Day, and I see we have some mothers here, and we probably have some grandmothers here too. And our program is about volunteering in the elementary schools, so in the grammar schools, grades 1 through 6. So this is, I'm going to speak to you about GranInvolve. Okay, our goal is to bring older adults into the Fairfax County's elementary schools. And we go into the schools where the children have the highest financial needs and where many of the students don't speak English at home. So those are our Title I schools. That's the name of the type of school that we go into. And we go exclusively to the Title I schools. So in your packet, handed out to you, is a list of the schools that we are currently in. And the nearby schools to this area are Park Lawn and Wayanoke. But in 2 years, we're going to be coming into all the schools in this area closer. And they would be like Bailey's will be included, Bailey's Elementary, I think Bailey's has 2 elementary schools. So those are the types of schools we'll be going into. So Title I schools have at least 40% of the children receiving free or reduced price lunches. And that's what designates it as a Title I school. And in Fairfax, these schools are also the same schools that have the highest diversity of cultures and languages. Now, our mission is to support the education of our most vulnerable populations, and we're also hoping for the seniors to reduce ageism by growing intergenerational relationships. And we're also hoping to increase intercultural understanding. So that is our goal. So many of the children at Title I schools don't speak English at home. In Fairfax County, more than 30% of the population does not speak English at home. So that's a large amount of people right here that don't speak English as their primary language. And these children often face a disadvantage in school because of the fact that they don't have English as their primary language. We help them by reading with them or explaining the math concepts to them. So our volunteers help the teacher. We either do something like play a game or we do an exercise with the children. Some children are auditory or sensory learners, and we give them an alternative way of learning. So sometimes they'll pick up a lesson that the teacher's been trying to teach and they just don't understand. When I'm in a classroom, when a child gets the idea and understands something the teacher's been trying to teach, we high five and we say, hey, that's great. And usually all the other children recognize that this one child has finally understood, and they all get excited, for each other, which is really nice. One of the important benefits of our program is that children see that adults are interested in their education. And if nothing else, when I have this talk today, I would like to make sure that everybody understands that in children, when they see an adult interested in their learning, it helps them to want to learn. So that's what we're doing by going into the classroom, is we're showing them education is important. Why did we start GranInvolve? Well, we started it because back in 2013, the county was worried that a lot of people who were new retirees were moving away. So they were trying to figure out what was going to make people want to stay in this area longer. And I have a lot of experience working with seniors because when I was working for the county, which was 10 years ago, I was the supervisor of all the senior centers. So I know a lot about the seniors in this community. They asked me to develop this program, which we did. Now, GranInvolve is all volunteers. None of us are paid, including me, and I run the program, but none of us gets paid. We're all volunteers. So my committee was formed to address both to develop an intergenerational program and also to help the people who live in our county, who speak English, understand the cultures that are coming into our county and that live in our county. So we all have a better understanding of everybody's cultures. I always volunteered when my children were little, and then I was so excited to volunteer when my grandchildren became old enough to go to school, and I started volunteering in their classrooms. And I love volunteering in the classrooms, and that's what gave us the idea to start GranInvolve, because it's really fun to be in the classroom with the children. The children are extremely curious, and they're just adorable. So our history, we started, this is the GranInvolve program, we started in year 1 with a pilot program, and in year 2, we started at 3 schools. In year 3, we were in 6 schools. In year 4, that's last year, we were in 16 schools, and this year we're adding 7 more schools. So we're going by magisterial districts. That means that the Board of Supervisors run the magisterial district, and we are right now going into the Lee district schools. And on the back of your paper, you'll see all the schools that we're going into this year, where we expect to go into 7. We're already in 2 of them. We've got 5 more to go. But the next area we're going to go in is Mason District. And this mosque here is in Mason District. So next year, we're going to start adding the Mason District schools. And we'll be going into all the Mason District schools. We figure it will take us 1.5 years to get volunteers in all of those schools, because Mason District has 12 Title I schools. So it's a lot of schools for us to move into, but we are moving ahead very quickly with a lot of volunteers. And I do a lot of talks like this to different groups in trying to encourage people to volunteer with our program. And especially, we would love to have more people who don't speak English in the classroom, so that the children will see that it's okay to get over their using their primary language and use more English, and to have somebody that looks and talks and speaks in their language. It's very important for them to see that their own people are very interested in their education. So we currently have, at the first school that we were in, we now have over 40, I think we've got 43 volunteers there. And we try to have at least 10 volunteers in every school that we go into. Some of the schools still, the newer schools only have 2 or 3, but we're working on bringing the numbers up at those schools. And we now have over 160 volunteers, and we're in 18 schools. In this county, there are over 50 Title I schools. And right now, as I said, we're in 18 of them, and we started 5 years ago. By year 10, which means 5 years from now, we expect to be in all of those schools. So the county has over 50 Title I schools, and they have 138 elementary schools. So it is almost half, more than a third, and almost a half of the schools in our county are Title I schools. And this is information that how a school can partner with us to come on ahead of schedule. So, for example, if there was somebody who already is working with the Bailey's Elementary School and wants to be our lead volunteer, if you came to me today and said, I want to be the lead volunteer at Bailey's Elementary, we could bring Bailey's on sooner. Even though it's not scheduled for another 2 years, we could bring it on right now if I had a volunteer that said they would coordinate that school and be my lead volunteer in that school. So this is just information about how a school can get on board faster. This is really interesting. Can you see this map? It's kind of light, but do you see the dots on the map? Those are all the Title I schools. And you are right there about midway on the right-hand side there, closer to the gray or the beige area, yellowy kind of an area there. That's about where you are now. And you can see that, actually you might be in the pink area. Let's see, I can't see, mine is too small so I can't tell, but somewhere along the right-hand side. Most of the Title I schools in Fairfax County are in the south or the east part of the county. So our goal, and we have leadership that's helping us to make these plans. We're working from the south, and we're in all of those gray area. All of those schools are now GranInvolve schools. And the next area is the orange yellow area, and by the end of this year we'll be in all of those schools. And the pinkish area is actually Mason District, and that's where we're going next, and that's where you are, actually in the pink area. And so you can see that once in a couple of years we're going to be finished with the majority of all the Title I schools. Then we're going to head north, and then we're going to head west. So I just find this is really interesting to see where the Title I schools are in the county. There are hardly any of them. Yes, okay. So there was a question about what is a Title I school, and that's a really good question because you should understand what a Title I school is. Most of the schools in this area are Title I schools. So if 40%, that means 40 out of 100 of the children who go to that school are eligible for free services like free lunch or free breakfast, then that school can become a Title I school. They receive federal monies, and I believe they also receive state monies, but they receive a lot of extra money and services that the other schools do not receive. For example, the Title I schools have less children per class. Their average school, I think is, I could be wrong, but I'm just guessing, it's about 22 to 25 children in the class, whereas the other schools in Fairfax County can have up to 30 children in a class. So a Title I school has less children. The principal receives a bulk of money that he can use however he sees fit in his school. Most of the principals hire parent advocates. Okay, so they call them parent liaisons, and those are people who work with the families to help the families receive services. So that is an extra thing that Title I schools receive that the other schools don't receive. And then the principal usually hires more math specialists and more reading specialists. So these are people who work with all the classes and all the teachers to encourage a higher math and reading scores. Those are only some of the things. I can't tell you all the other benefits, but if your children or grandchildren go to a Title I school, it's a good thing. They are wonderful schools that receive wonderful benefits. And the other thing I have noticed, and I go to lots of schools, Title I schools, and I also visit the other schools that, like, for example, my grandchildren go to, and the teachers at Title I schools are special teachers. They love their job. They're there because they want to be at a Title I school, and they have such empathy for the children that go to those schools. I can't tell you how wonderful the Title I teachers are. And at most of the Title I schools, they have after-school programs that the teachers run on their own time. They do this, they're not getting paid to do the after-school programs, but they choose to do the after-school programs. So I don't have enough good things to say about Title I schools. They're wonderful. So, and anyway, I'm glad you asked that question about Title I schools. Oh, okay. What is like a job description of the title of the parent liaisons? Well, the parent liaisons work, I don't know exactly what their job description is, but they work with the families. The parent liaisons that I know always are fluent in another language that's prevalent at the schools. And the most prevalent language at our schools right now is Spanish. So a lot of the parent liaisons that I work with speak Spanish. At Park Lawn, the parent liaison there that we work with speaks 4 languages. So she is well versed in being able to take care of the families that speak another language, even other than Spanish. Okay, so language skills are important. Okay, but they also, I know that they have children that they work with, and they work with families. They arrange things like. They help the parents become involved in the PTAs, and they work with the backpacks that come home. Most of the Title I schools have a backpack program, and on Friday the children receive a backpack full of food for the family for the weekend. So the parent liaison would help with that. So the parent liaison works with a lot of the services that are available to the children through the county or through nonprofits, and she helps to coordinate those services. Okay?
So they want volunteers?
Yes. Would the parent liaison want to volunteer? I'm not sure whether the parent liaison can use a volunteer. We can use volunteers in the classrooms. Okay? So I'm going to tell you I think it might be the next slide that tells us what the volunteers do. Yeah, there's 2 types of volunteering that happen with GranInvolve. There's school volunteers in the classroom, and then there's action team volunteers. So in the classroom, the volunteers work directly with the teachers and the children. They can be mentors. Do you know what a mentor is? A mentor is like with one child, you work with one child, and you just become friends with that child and listen to them and work with them over the years. You usually keep that same child over all of their school years. So some of our people are mentors. A lot of our people do reading. Some of us help with math, and some are just classroom assistants. So we ask that all of our volunteers give at least 1 hour a week. But most of our volunteers give more than 1 hour. By the time you get to the school, it's easier to stay 2 hours than to work for an hour and then go home again. So most of our people give more than an hour. So we're in the classroom, and I'll tell you how it works. Let me see if the next slide is. Yeah, the next slide is more about. Okay, so with a reading volunteer, sometimes we listen to the children reading, and sometimes we read to them. But usually we're listening to the child reading. And let me give you an example of how our volunteers can help. So I had a child who was reading to me, and they kept stumbling over the word gate and path. And they couldn't read this story because they kept on, every time they saw those words, they couldn't say them. Well, the child didn't know what a gate and a path was. The child lived in an apartment, and they didn't have gates, and the path was in the woods. And the child knew sidewalks, parking lots, but they didn't really know what a path was. So I explained what a path and a gate was, and then the child could read the story. So that's the kind of help that we give, that the children, a lot of times, it's a word that they've not experienced in English. They may know this word in their own language, but they don't know what that word is in English. So we just say, okay, well, that's this, and explain it to them, and then they can read. A lot of times in the younger classrooms, like in the kindergarten classroom, we'll play a game with the children to help them identify letters if they don't know what their letters are, the sounds of letters. There's games that you can do. So when I work with games, it's usually with a small group of like 4 or 5 children. And the teacher gives me these 4 or 5 children. We play the game. The children love to play the game. In fact, when we're leaving the classroom, they argue over who's going to hold the game. So I usually end up with 4 children holding this tiny little game that's this big. But all 4 of them want to hold the game for me. And then we sit down, we play the game. They all try to win. I have to know the rules so I can be sure that they're not taking advantage of the fact that they think I don't know what the rules are. So we play the game, and the children are very supportive of one another. And then it only lasts for 15 minutes because their attention span only lasts about 15 minutes. Then I get another group of children. But most often, I'd say our volunteers work with one child, and they just are helping them with their reading. Now, sometimes we'll have somebody will go into a classroom and help a child with their reading, and then they'll go to lunch, and they'll mentor another child over lunch. So they have lunch with one particular child, and then they'll go back to the classroom and do some more reading. So now in the math, we usually play games. So I'll give you an example of a math game. They have blocks that click and attach to each other, so there's a string of 10 blocks. Okay, so I take off 5, I take off 6 and 4, and then put them behind my back, and I show them the 6, and I say, okay, I need to have 10. How many more? And then I take my hand out from behind my back. There's 4. They count out, and everybody counts that there's 10. So those are the kinds of very, very simple games that we give, that the teacher can tell you what the instructions are, but usually the children know what the instructions are. They tell me how to play the game. So there's also kindergarten readiness. So sometimes we work in the kindergarten classroom, and we do very, very simple games, understanding colors or sounds of letters, okay? So in GranInvolve, we also have what we call skilled level volunteers, and these are our leaders. We currently have, I told you we have over 160 volunteers, 20 of them are leaders. And they are the people that get together on a monthly basis, and they help us make our plan for expanding, how quickly we're going to go into the county, when we're going to go to different areas, how we're going to market, how we advertise. So that is what our leadership does. So at each school, we have to have a volunteer liaison, and we call this person our school action team leader. And the school cannot have a GranInvolve program unless they have one lead volunteer. And that lead volunteer helps the other volunteers get fingerprinted and go through the background check. And then they also help them to make sure that they're happy in the classroom, that they're with the teacher. So we need a lead volunteer at every school. And this is just talking about what we do at each school, and the different teams that we have. Okay, so some fun pictures. This is Suba Satyan, and Suba is reading to a whole class. He actually volunteers about 5 hours a week for us. And he volunteers at Crestwood. Okay, here's another volunteer working with just one child, and this is what we usually do. We don't usually work with the whole class. We usually work with the one child. And at this one school, we were hoping to encourage families to come to the nighttime activities, so we got the local library to give us 850 books, and we took these books, and every time the children came to a nighttime activity, they got to take books home for free. And for some of the children, it was the first books that they had that belonged to them. So it was a really exciting night for the kids. So GranInvolve, okay, so what we have is, we're hoping to establish lasting and meaningful relationships between generations and cultures. Although we're called GranInvolve, it's not about being a grandparent. It's about allowing people of a grand age to share their talents and resources with their community. So we do feel that we are impacting the Fairfax County community. Many of our volunteers have such a better understanding of what happens in the school. As a grandparent, I go into the schools. It's very different than when my own children were in school. So I get to see what it's like to be in a school now in today's teaching. We won a statewide award, and the governor gave it to us. So this is an award-winning program. Channel 4 just recently did a really nice video for us a couple of weeks ago, and it was on the Channel 4 News. So I wish I could show it to you because the children are adorable and the seniors are obviously having a good time. We like to say that we are changing the world one child at a time, and we use this African proverb, it takes a village to raise a child, and I think that's really, really important, is that our community become involved in the schools and show the community how interested we are in the education of our children. Okay, so that concludes, and that's our information, which is also on the sheets that I gave you. One is our email address and the other is our website. Thank you, everybody. Are there any questions? Yes. How do we coordinate a volunteer? Well, somebody will say to me, I'm interested in volunteering. So we first of all figure out what school they want to volunteer at. The closest schools to this area right here in this mosque are the Park Lawn Elementary and Wayanoke Elementary. Both of them are down the road, I think just a couple of miles. So the first thing that I would do would be get your contact information, and then I would send that to the school staff person that's in charge of the GranInvolve program. So we have a GranInvolve person in charge of that program at each school, and the school assigns a person on staff. Usually that person is the assistant principal or the guidance counselor. Sometimes it's the parent liaison. So we write to them and say, you have a new volunteer. The school contacts the new volunteer and says, okay, what would you like to do? Because you have your choice. You don't have to do math. You can say, I want to do reading, or I want to just be in the kindergarten room. And then the school staff person also at the same time has asked all the teachers if they would like a volunteer, so they know that there's a kindergarten classroom teacher that wants a volunteer, and they match. So the school staff person matches you, and also the times that you're available. So you tell them what time you're available. So you say, I'm only going to be available on Wednesdays from 10 to 11:30. So then the school staff person will find somebody that wants a volunteer during that time. So that's how it works. Now, you do need to be fingerprinted, and that is you need to have the background check, and that is for the safety and security of all of our children. Okay, if you are a parent at a school, you usually don't have to be background checked. Okay, so if you're a parent or even a grandparent of a child in the school, usually you can volunteer. You don't have to go through GranInvolve. GranInvolve works for people who are not associated with a school. Okay, so we have all of our volunteers are travel, 10, 20 minutes. Some of them travel a half an hour to get to the school that they're volunteering at. They don't have any ties to the school. So GranInvolve kind of is a way for you to get into the school, and it allows the school to accept people that are not parents, and they can be background checked, and the school knows, okay, this person's okay to volunteer. Did we have a question over here? No, the children, in our schools, children must speak English. They are not allowed to speak their native languages. So in our schools, all the children must speak English. And generally, in about 2 months, the child comes in not knowing a word of English. Within 2 months, the child's speaking fluent English. It's amazing, really amazing how quickly they pick it up.
Child learned so quickly.
Children learn English very quickly. They do. And at school, they're only allowed to speak English. Although I happen to know that when they go to the lunchroom, they sit with the other children that speak their language, and they don't really speak English. But they're not supposed to speak English. So, they're not supposed to speak their native language, but I know they do. And the children help each other, learn English. Oh, that's a lot of languages. Yeah, that's wonderful. We could certainly use a volunteer like that because the children, even though you can't speak those languages with the children know that you know those languages. And it's so important for them to see that somebody of their own culture is interested in their learning. It really is important. No, this is the number here. We're with GranInvolve, okay? So the number is, there's not a phone number on here. Okay, this is our email address, and this is our website, okay? And if you do not use if you don't use the internet, okay, then I can take a phone number, and we can do something by phone. But usually I work by email because it helps me keep track of people.
Send an email.
You can send an email. Send it to the info@GranInvolve. Okay, thank you. Okay, what's your name?
Retired. My name is Muhammad.
Muhammad. Okay, I'll remember that.
I am retired,
Yes.
and I want to keep myself busy.
That's wonderful. Well, we really target retired people because that's most of our volunteers are retired people because you have to be available during the day. So most of our people are retired, and I would love to hear from you.
How many hours a day you say?
You have to give one, and you only have to go once a week, but most people give a couple of hours. Yeah.
Full day.
Yeah. That would be wonderful. Okay, do we have any other questions? Okay, so we're getting some additional information about what a parent liaison does. Okay, what's your name? Theta? Nefita. Nefita knows more than I do. Okay, so I'm going to repeat what she says. Okay, tell me again. They're a link between the family and school. That's what the parent liaison is. Almost all of our Title I schools have parent liaisons. They make people that have a different language feel welcome at the school. They can interpret and translate for them in different languages. So if they are not fluent in that language themselves, they can make arrangements for somebody to help them that is fluent in that language 24 hours. So at any time, you would be available, another language person would be available to you. So you're also an advocator for the parent. Do you know what an IEP meeting is? That's a meeting for children that receive special services, okay? And so the parent liaison would go to that IEP meeting with the parent. So they're aware of other services that are available to the people and can help to link them to those services. So are you a parent liaison? At what school?
Glasgow Middle School, Justice High School.
Glasgow Middle School.
Justice High School.
Oh, and Justice High School also. Okay. So the elementary schools can have a title, use the term Title I. But sometimes middle schools and high schools receive Title I money, but they're not called Title I schools. So because they're eligible, it's just the Title I doesn't come with a middle school or a high school. But there are middle schools and high schools in this area that receive Title I funds. Thank you. That was really informative. Okay. We're not allowed to be with you during an IEP meeting.
My knowledge is not
Okay.
that extent.
Okay, so about going to IEP, I think this is a conversation the two of you need to have because I'm not sure how that works. They have to have a parent liaison has to have a certain proficiency in language to be able to be with you at an IEP meeting and be considered your interpreter and translator. Okay, thank you, that explains it. Okay. But anyway, if nothing else after today, I hope you all have a better appreciation of your Title I schools and what is available to your children through the schools. Okay, we have a wonderful school system in Fairfax County. And if anybody is interested in volunteering with GranInvolve, I'll hang around for a few minutes so you can talk to me privately. Thank you.